Welcome to News Analytica. I am Jalani Tesfaye, and today we have a special segment where we dive deeper into key issues in the Horn of Africa. We are joined by Professor Brook Hailu to provide his insights on the ongoing crisis in Sudan. In this interview, Professor Brook will provide valuable insights on key issues, including the role of Egypt in the peace talks and the accusations of bias against its mediation efforts. We will also discuss the impact of external actors fueling the conflict, the national security risks Ethiopia faces due to the war, and what foreign policy steps Ethiopia can take to restore its position as a regional mediator. Additionally, we will examine the potential for Sudan's fragmentation and explore the most viable solutions to end the war and stabilize the country. Stay tuned for an in-depth conversation on these pressing issues and more. Professor Brook, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate
it. With Egypt hosting the second round of peace talks on the Sudan crisis, there are claims that its involvement is driven by its own national interest, favoring the Sudanese Army Forces South over the Rapid Support Forces RSF. The RSF has accused Egypt of bias, even alleging airstrikes. How does this impact Egypt's credibility as a mediator? What steps could Egypt take to ensure its mediation efforts are effective and impartial? Additionally, what might Egypt's role symbolize for Ethiopia, given the regional dynamics?
Very good. Thank you. It's a great question. I would say yes, for sure. It will affect the credibility of Egypt for the following reason. First and foremost, in order to effectively respond to this question, one has to really get back a little bit and see the dynamics of relations between the Sudan and Egypt. Both are neighboring countries, of course. Both drink the Nile, just like Ethiopia, of course. Egypt is an ancient society. In Sudan also you find the Meroe civilization and others as well. Both have interacted. There is a push and pull factor between the two peoples and two societies. Eventually, when the time for colonialism came in the 19th century, of course, what we observe is that this part was given to the United Kingdom. Just before the United Kingdom took over from Turkey, actually. In the First World War, Turkey, or Turkiye, as the new saying goes, its colonial possessions in the Middle East, in today's Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Transjordan, and all others, were handed over to either France or either to the United Kingdom. So Egypt was, with a silver plate, handed over to the British. So the British were there, plus in the Sudan, in today's Sudan. At the time, it was called the Anglo-Sudanese Condominium, it was called. So both were there. At first, Egypt was given independence by the British in the 1920s. Then the monarchy was restored and the Farouk family took over power. While in the Sudan, believe it or not, Sudan was handed over, guess to whom? To the Egyptians to administer Sudan. It's a very rare kind of situation. So the Egyptians were really calling the shots in the Sudanese legal system, political system, administration, and also putting in key positions in Sudan's, in Khartoum and other places, as well as in the districts, key officials of Egyptian origin. Some were mixed with Egyptian and Sudanese origin. So that was the case in the 1940s and 50s. Now what we see is that in 1956, the nominal independence was given to the Sudanese by the British, and Sudan became independent. Okay. Then it was thought that the two are now in equal footing, both being sovereign countries. But from that moment on to this day, what we see between Egypt and Sudan is like a junior and senior kind of a relationship. The Egyptians feel that so much is at stake in the Sudan. Hence, they feel, in most cases, empowered to at least shape the course of events, what's going on in the Sudan. This I could back it up with facts, like for instance, in 1956, democratic elections were held, A new administration took over power, and within 2 years or something, the military took over.
In relation to this, what might Egypt's role symbolize for Ethiopia, given the regional dynamics?
Very good. In the case of Ethiopia and in Egypt, we are two brotherly people who have lived with each other for thousands and thousands and thousands of years as neighbors. On top of that, we drink the same water. That's Abai. They call it the Nile, but the correct way is Abai. You know. So thirdly, the Egyptians feel that their existence, their destiny, should be seen from the point of view of, having a say in whatever happens in Ethiopia, even to the point of controlling it, because they feel life is water, and Abai, their existence is totally rotates around the volume of water coming to the downstream nation of the Sudan, and then it goes from the Sudan to Egypt. So the Egyptians had always felt that whatever is going on in Ethiopia would affect them, and whatever is going on in Ethiopia, they follow it with scrutiny, and they try to shape things, the political domestic dynamics in Ethiopia, the way they see fit. Evidence, yes. If we go back thousands of years in the Pharaoh time, believe it or not, my sister, every rainy season they take a stick in the delta area of Egypt, and they put the stick in the delta area, very, very tall stick, and they measure. This year they say from Habasha, from the land of Habasha, how is the water flow? They measure it every year. If it goes down, they say, it will affect our existence. If it comes way above the average, they say, thank God, they will continue with life. So even the Pharaoh time, thousands of years, they follow the quantity, the flow, and what's going on in Ethiopia as well. This has continued until the later years. In the 19th century, the Egyptians had a number of times had military expeditions. They wanted to shape the course of events by taking military offensives and with the objective of controlling Ethiopia. Two recent wars stand out, 1875 and 1876. The Battle of Gura and Gundit in the province of Bahr Nagash, in what's now called Eritrea. So we fought two bloody wars, Ethiopians I mean. We fought two bloody wars, and both times Ethiopia won the war. The objective was, had they won the war, it was their purpose was to control the source of Abai, to come to the center of Ethiopia, to today's Amhara region and Lake Tana region, and to control it. That was their objective. In so doing, you could see to what extent they have prepared themselves. A very large army, well trained at the time, with modern weapons of the time, and even in the second expedition, they even employed as leading officers American citizens who fought in the American Civil War, and who lost the war from the southern states. Can you imagine? Majors, colonels, they gave them a job. So they brought them all the way to Egypt, and they were the trainers, they were the ones logistics, the organization, and they led the war, and all were liquidated. So you could see how the seriousness that the Egyptians took, so they lost the war. In recent times, of course, what we see is that the Egyptians are involved in Ethiopian political dynamics. For them, they feel a weakened, a divided Ethiopia, which will be weak, is conducive for their objective. A united, powerful Ethiopia is not good for them. To this day, that's their policy. What do I mean by this? Evidence. In the 40s and 50s, what we see is that a number of liberation fronts mushroomed in our part of the world. And among the liberation fronts that mushroomed, a number of them were in the 50s, the Eritrean different liberation movements, like say the Jabha, the Eritrean People's Front. And then after Jabha, what we find is another front called Al-Wahid. And then after that, Sha'abiyya or EPLF, today it's called Hegdef or PFDJ. They also emerged. Okay, all these traces you see a very, very strong Egyptian support, material, moral, media support. is given to them. On top of that, OLF, the Oromo Liberation Front. So Cairo is their home. You know, in the 60s, what we see is, and the early 70s, even before the revolution, what we see is radio broadcasts, mass kind of message, call it propaganda, misinformation, what have you, being transmitted from Al-Qahira. Al-Qahira is Egypt, Cairo, from Al-Nisr, from that country. So it's not only Eritrea, but other things. So this has continued. And they believe that whatever resistance is there, even recent times in Benshangul Gumuz, they support the Benshangul Gumuz Liberation Front or something to this day. Why? Because they feel that, and others like in the conflict in the north of Ethiopia and Tigray region, and even in the Amhara region now. After that, there are so many reports coming in, officially and unofficially. They supporting, psychological warfare, military weapons, ammunitions, flights, unknown flights coming in and out of the country illegally, things like that. Here again, the purpose is what? A weakened Ethiopia is better for their existence. They feel, wrongly, I feel, if you ask me, they couldn't find a better sisterly and brotherly people than Ethiopians, really. Had Ethiopians had these evil intentions, Ethiopia could have done so many harmful things, even the flow of water of the Nile. Yes, we cannot stop it, of course, but at least some harm could have been done. And on top of that, Ethiopia always reciprocates relations with Egypt with positive things, like, Abai, when we started the project, calling them, inviting them for meetings, so that they will be reassured that Ethiopia has no access to grind, jeopardizing the existence of the Egyptians. So I think it has all continued to this day. What we find to this day, and I'll give it back to you, of course, is the recent tripartite agreement between Al-Qahira, Asmara, and Mogadishu. That is as clear as daylight. The very reason for that is also, to put Ethiopia in jeopardy, especially here again. I mean, look, after 35 years, the Egyptians come to Somalia, and they try to play advocacy role, but where was Egypt when Somalia was a failed state, was in turmoil? Let's compare notes. It was Ethiopia who, before even the peacekeeping mission was sent, it was Ethiopia unilaterally who sent troops to stabilize Somalia and fight out before Al-Shabaab, the Islamic courts, the Al-Ittihad al-Islamiyya, and after that, of course, the Al-Shabaab, which is still strong, by the way. Mogadishu was even controlled by them. Only Baidoa area was under the control of the warlords at the time. It was Ethiopian troops who stabilized the whole area and then handed it over willingly to AMISOM. AMISOM finished its mandate 2022, I believe, in April. Then it was given to ATMIS. ATMIS will finish its mandate in 8 days' time. January 1st, 2025, we'll have the new one, AUZOM, that will take over. And all this tells you that a good neighbor indeed is a good friend of Somalia, compared to the records of Egyptians who came here, to play, whatever machinations against Abai and Gerd. So that's how I think we need to put it in the right context and perspective, I think.
That's very insightful, Professor. Thank you. Let's discuss the growing concerns that external actors, through military and financial support to both the South and RSF, are protecting the conflict in Sudan. Who are the primary external players involved, and how do their competing interests sustain the war instead of promoting resolution? And could the conflict have reached a resolution sooner without these external interventions?
A great question. Yes, there are external elements who are directly and indirectly involved in the Sudan. Two of them, two main actors we have cited, and that's one is Egypt, and on behalf of the Al-Burhan, the central government, the Sudanese armed forces. On behalf of the rapid forces, we find UAE and other Gulf countries. The dynamics is very quite interesting in that There is, for instance, Libya. We cannot put outside Libya from the equation. Believe it or not, in Libya, the Egyptians and the Turks and the Russians and France and the Western countries are fighting each other over Libya. Libya is literally now 3 states, some even say 2.5, 2 states. Each movement have carved out, their own territory. So the Egyptians, as neighbors, have Libya. So the Egyptians are also involved in that. So people are involved in the Sudan as well to get back at Egypt in the front. So it's not easy. The Turks are there. Egypt and Turkey, I should put it in a very diplomatic way, are not always in good terms. The Turks have ruled Egypt for many, many centuries, and the Egyptians don't like it. When the Ottoman Turks lost the First World War, is that now then, as I said earlier, Egypt was handed over to the United Kingdom. Then there is the emergent regional powers of the United Arab Emirates. There is Qatar. They are rivals. One is a Sunni predominated country, the other is a Shia. And then you have the role of Saudi Arabia in Sudan, the neighboring country. And there is also Eritrea in their own way. They want to shape the course of events in the Sudan because there are minorities that live both in the Sudan and in Eritrea. So that should be also underlined. So there are quite a number of countries that are involved. And also at an outreach, we can also speak of Yemen, the Houthi insurgency, and now they control seat of power. And Yemen is also literally divided into 2, and 2 plus 5 and 3 sometimes. So that also is unstable. There was before the new change in the Sudan was involved in Yemen, and behind it were other countries. Sudanese troops were the ones who fought in Saudi Arabia as well, in the borders between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. So the whole thing is messy and complicated. So these are the facts. But back to your question. Yes, neighboring countries, including Eritrea, in Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, UAE, Yemen, and Egypt are involved in that process, in the Sudan process. So now the outcome of all this would be, yes, they have impacts. The outcome of all this will be, had Sudan was strong, where the Sudanese had put their country ahead before them, had they decided to sort out their differences among themselves without allowing external interference, that would have been the best solution. But each side has brought in. Oh, by the way, Chad is also involved. Sorry for getting back a little bit. Chad is also involved because of the rapid forces. The rapid forces come from the Darfur area, North, West, and South Darfur. It's now one area, but divided into 3. And the Darfurians, Darfur means people of Dar area, Dagalo and his tribe are from Darfur. They live both in Chad and in the Sudan. There is no boundary. So the Chadian government are also involved in that process. So the Chad is also another actor. We shouldn't forget that. So the RDF get the support from Chad as well, from the western side, and not only from the Gulf side. So that should be underlined. So I think the Sudanese, had they sat around the table and sorted out, hammered their differences, they would have solved their problem. But rather than do that, each has tried, the 2 military organizations had tried to bring their own supporters, foreign countries, into their picture. So that, I think, is their biggest problem. I would like to add one more point, and that is, how about Ethiopia? How did Ethiopia interfere in the Sudan domestic politics? Or how did Ethiopia handle it? Honestly, the role of Ethiopia was very, very positive in the crisis in the Sudan. How? If I'm asked how, this is how I will explain it. In 2019, Omar al-Bashir was overthrown with this insurgency and unrest of civilian group of the Sudan. And then the military, his own generals, got rid of him. and they established a sovereignty military derg, or their own military derg, military council. In so doing, what we shouldn't forget is that in the case of Ethiopia, I remember in April, Omar al-Bashir was overthrown and the new leadership Burhan took over power. In 2-3 months' time, a delegation was sent from Ethiopia to Al-Khartoum. The delegation was headed by, this is the idea of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. He sent Ambassador, my good friend Ambassador Mahmoud Drir. He used to be Ethiopia's ambassador in Al-Qahira in Cairo, to the Sudan with a proposal, what we call the 39 months proposal. It was spearheaded by Ethiopia. It was accepted within a short time by all sides in the Sudan. What does the 39-month formula? It was accepted. The first 21 months will be headed by the military. The remaining, 18, 19 months, power will be given to the civilians. That was the arrangement. So Prime Minister Abiy was there. The whole world appreciated that. African Union, IGAD, and everything. So Al-Burhan his mandate was continued as the president of the provisional government. A technocrat was named as a prime minister, Prime Minister Hamdok, and he also handpicked Sudanese from all over the world, highly professional technocrats who know the thing, who know how to run the government. They formed the government and things were smooth. They started working. When the 19th, 20th, and 21st month approached, the Sudanese military, they began to drag their feet, disrespecting what was already signed. They were supposed to hand over power to the civilians. That is the crisis that resulted in the current crisis. That happened in 2021, I believe, in fall of 2021. So once again, the country was in deep turmoil. And then the rapid deployment force, they didn't see eye to eye with the military, so they broke rank, so they began to fight each other. And the whole country went down the tube. The prime minister was put in prison, the cabinet was disbanded, the technocrats were kicked out, and since then what we find now is Sudan is a deep crisis. So my point is the role of Ethiopia was positive, conducive, found acceptance from all sides and all walks of life, from the trade unions, from women organizations, labor organizations, all those civic organizations, they supported Ethiopian. So it worked, and it was working fine until the military, disrupted the whole process. So the role of Ethiopia is this. And now Ethiopia has an open door policy. Migrants, refugees are coming in. So Ethiopia is also, as a good neighbor, could have played dirty, as the saying goes. But that was not the case. And that's why Ethiopia, even last year, the Prime Minister went all the way to Port Sudan to talk to the leadership, and Ethiopia was accepted with open arms. The federal government does not control Khartoum. They had moved their capital city to the Red Sea port of Port Sudan as a provisional capital city of the Sudan. So I think the role of Ethiopia should also be underlined. So I think the solution, once again, for all this hiccup and mess is the Sudanese themselves, without allowing the interference of neighboring and regional powers, to sort out their problems by themselves and to put Sudan ahead of their own personal, selfish, financial reasons or whatever political reasons that they might have.
Thank you, Professor. I believe the important question here is, could the conflict have reached a resolution sooner
Yes.
without these external intervention you just mentioned?
Absolutely. They could have, provided they were in control. And they were not in control, I think. The Sudanese themselves. And they were not in control, and they allowed external forces to come in, to mess up, to interfere in their affairs. So yes, I agree with your premise. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. This gives us a lot to consider. Moving ahead, I would like to talk about the conflict in Sudan, which has significant implications for countries of the Horn, particularly Ethiopia, as you just mentioned. With large-scale displacement and migration, how real is the threat of militant infiltration, cross-border attacks or instability spilling into Ethiopia? And what are the broader national security risks Ethiopia could face if the crisis continues? Unresolved, of course.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, when such kinds of hiccups, such kinds of conflicts occur in the Sudan, literally similar developing countries, you are, it's like you are, you are sort of having an air where extremist groups would mushroom, or you would allow a swamp, and mosquitoes will immediately, in a week's time, they will, so that's the situation. So that's the biggest danger. The more a country is lawless, the more there is anarchy, and also the more the central government, the power, the seat of power, is unable to control each and every part of Sudan, then you'll create what? Rooms, vacuums of power, where such groups either will domestically rise up among the population, or they might infiltrate from other countries. That's always the danger. Look at West Africa, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, what we see in Niger, in Mali, Niger especially. What we see is we have both types of terrorist organizations in these countries. Mali, literally half of Mali is taken over by Islamist fundamental terrorist groups. It's gone. And the French has withdrawn, the Russian troops were in, still are, but still the problem is not solved. And then Niger, the same thing, where there is uranium. And that's very, very dangerous for Africa and for the whole world, because you use that uranium to make dirty bombs or nuclear bombs. So by the same logic, when we come here, I feel not only Sudan, but even Ethiopia is in danger, Eritrea is in danger, the whole area is in Egypt, Djibouti and others are in danger, because the ability of controlling such kinds of extremist groups becomes weaker and weaker. So that's the big danger. So how should we find the solutions to that? By first bringing peace to Sudan, by making the Sudanese groups come together and compromise and have a national government, coalition or salvation government or what have you. Third, by making sure that these terrorist groups will not pass from their countries to the Sudan, or from Sudan to come to Ethiopia or what have you. Everybody should pull in the sources, because terrorism is a bigger threat. What kind of terrorist groups do we have? All kinds of jihadist groups. Two stand out because they have become now global. That's what we find in West Africa and in Nigeria as well, in Niger and in Burkina Faso. Two types. We have the Al-Qaeda brand of terrorist organizations, which is senior, which is older. And then we have the IS, the Islamic State, kind of a brand, which started in today's Iraq and Syria, which was literally defeated. It started defeated in 2012, 2014. So the Islamic State brand is already, believe it or not, in Africa, in this part of the Horn as well. West Africa, they are well established, both brands. Both brands are struggling against each other. But there is a marriage of convenience. They feel there is a cause more than them, so they join hands as well. But eventually, they contradict themselves. Both are exercising whatever they exercise in the name of Islam, spreading Islam, but as to the way and tactics of this terrorist organization is different. One, the Al-Qaeda branch believes in the fact that each state should organize its own and then hook up with others, while the Islamic State is there for this aggressive push, not recognizing whatever territorial boundaries that we have today. Evidence is when the Islamic State, at first it was called ISIL, the Islamic State in Iraq and Lebanon, or Liban, and then it began to be called ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq, and then in Syria, ISIS, and now they call themselves IS, just Islamic State as an umbrella organization. So that's the biggest danger, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Let's shift our focus a bit now. Given Ethiopia's historical role as a key player in the Horn of Africa, how can it overcome current challenges, including isolation and destabilization efforts by some regional actors, to reclaim its position as a mediator in the Sudan conflict and a stabilizing force in the region? And what foreign policy strategies could strengthen Ethiopia's credibility and capacity to promote peace and regional integration in this complex geopolitical landscape?
Great question, thank you. Well, Ethiopia has can play and does play a decisive role in the Horn. First, let's see the reasons, the factors for this. First and foremost, in this part of the world that we call the Horn, Ethiopia has the largest economy, the largest population. Geographical wise, maybe Sudan, it has broken into two, but still Sudan might be a bit bigger. The geostrategic position that Ethiopia has, the Red Sea area, the Bab el-Mandeb area, the Gulf of Aden area, and the Indian subcontinent. Although we don't have access to the sea, still we are right there. We just see it. If you rise up in a helicopter, 60 kilometers is nothing. You just look at the Red Sea and bye-bye. It's not yours, but you know what? We are so close. So we can have an impact on that. So yes, Ethiopia can play a role. Second, we had our own problems the last 45, 50 years. Civil disorder, struggle for political power, and then we have military rule, and then we have the EPRDF, the TPLF-led government, and now we have the big change led by the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed. Now, economically, when we see Ethiopia, Ethiopia is on the move. Its economy is growing by leaps and bounds. You know, I wouldn't say don't trust me, but use as a resource, not just common resources, but look at the World Bank, IMF, credible sources and other ones. Secondly, its military power and might, strong army, professional, well armed, the Air Force, as well as the ground forces, as well as the police force, its ability to even to fight wars and to maintain economic growth, like sad to say that we had in the north, the rebellion by the former TPLF rulers of Ethiopia. They rebelled against their own country, against their own mother, So that had to be contained, and the central government literally won, controlling that. And now we have in northwest Ethiopia as well, the Amara movement. So, I mean, it tells you something. The government fighting 2-3 things at the same time. Maintaining law and order and peace, and protecting the integrity of the country from fragmentation. On the one hand, you have so many economic projects and things moving on. The green legacy, reforming the finance, the fiscal policy, the monetary policy, reforming the private business, allowing private banks, the telecom, privatizing it. And Ethiopia is now open for business, and a few days ago, allowing private Western banks, any banks literally, to come here and invest. Things are moving in all the direction. So what this in effect would be the strength and the power of Ethiopia, which will be reflected because of this. So what we have is, without doubt, Ethiopia is the central power, more so now than before. What this means, the consequence of this is Ethiopia can set the course of events, not only in our country, but also in the region. To achieve what? To maintain peace and order, for example. So to call the shots. When I say this, I don't want to be wrongly understood, not by you, but maybe some folks. And that is not by force, but by diplomatic and peaceful means. Ethiopia has one of the, I would say, professional diplomatic core in the world. Key embassies in key countries, we have already 60 or something. You find diplomatic dividends. You find Addis Ababa being the capital of Africa as the diplomatic seat. Yesterday the French president was here and he departed. Look, that's significant. Then you had before him other heads of state. They come in and move out. I mean, they don't come to your country for nothing. There must be a reason. And that reason is that they need a dependable and credible partner. And Ethiopia has become a credible, dependable partner to all. To France, to England, to America even, to the European Union, and to other partner countries, to BRICS countries. Ethiopia has joined BRICS. It was invited to join BRICS among candidates of 35 or 39 candidates. That it tells you something. They don't just let you come in. It's not a free club. They have their own criteria. The economic policy, fiscal policy. How is it? Can we depend on Ethiopia? Do we have a serious leadership or not? It's like a report card. They add up all the points. Otherwise, they don't show. They don't even invite you. So that itself testifies to the fact that Ethiopia is finding resonance, acceptance not only in Africa, obviously, in the region, in the Middle East. Look at our relations with UAE, Qatar, with Saudi Arabia, with Turkey. They are becoming one of our major partners. Look at our relations with Russia, with China. We have a strategic partnership with China. They don't give you this, the Chinese. This is a very special status. With Russia, we have a special status. Look, this tells you something. So Ethiopia is now on the move. It's being more accepted. So with all this comes accountability and responsibility. They want a country that plays a role in the maintenance of peace and order. Look what we have contributed in Somalia under the African Union and the UN flag, maintaining peace and order to save the failed state. Look at Abiy. Look at in South Sudan. We used to have a peace. Before that, we had in Liberia, in Burundi, and Rwanda. Ethiopia has always been chosen by the UN to serve as a peacekeepers mission. Why? Because well organized, disciplined, fair play. They do their job wisely. They don't only fight, like in Somalia, for instance. They dig wells. They build hospitals. They build clinics, maternity clinics, and big hospitals. They build bridges. They say smallpox and other, children's kind of measles and what have you, vaccinations, when it is organized by UNICEF and what have you. Ethiopian troops are there guiding the teams. So that's why, for instance, the regional state governments of Somalia, like in Jubaland, like in the southwest state, like in Gulmudug, like Somaliland itself and Puntland, they favor Ethiopia. Why? Because of our deeds, with our good name and good reputation. So with all these positive assets, capital, Ethiopia, as in the Horn, it has become a leading country. And here I need to be very serious. With all this comes responsibility. And Ethiopia, I feel, now I'm becoming personal, we should willingly assume this responsibility. We shouldn't shy away and leave a vacuum in the Red Sea area for would-be little states and tyrants and what have you, because this responsibility is earned by us, and we should exercise it. Because if you leave the stage to other folks who have other intentions, then you'll be once again second round kind of a turmoil. So Sudan, for instance, based on this, Ethiopia is credible. They want Ethiopia always to sit in the negotiation process whenever the Western countries or the Arab countries, like the Jeddah Declaration and all the other countries, they invite Ethiopia to play a role in these discussions and negotiations, believing and being convinced that the role of Ethiopia might play and is critical in that sense, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Building on this important discussion, I would like to ask you, what foreign policy strategy would you recommend to achieve all the things we have mentioned, and also to strengthen Ethiopia's credibility and capacity to promote regional peace and stability?
Ethiopia? Yeah. Yes, Ethiopia, with all this responsibility and accountability comes, taking charge of one's country, addressing Ethiopia's problem. We are still a developing country. We have so many issues that need to be addressed. Not enough roads, not enough schools, not enough health centers. So we should focus on domestically, as well as we should protect our interests from the outside. What kind of interest? Our national interest. One key thing, issue in Ethiopian foreign policy that now is openly shared to the Ethiopian audience, as well as the regions, as well as the globally, is Ethiopia's quest or Ethiopia's wish to have access to the sea. That should be implemented, and that should be continued to be followed. When Ethiopia declared by the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy, that Ethiopia has the right to have access to the sea using diplomatic and peaceful means and not violent means, that is our right. Even the United Nations Convention supports us. That was really a breaking point for the region, because Ethiopia was taken for granted as a landlocked country, and you don't have anything else to do in the Red Sea situation. But to the contrary, it's our right. It's our right to have access to the sea. It's our right to be back in the Red Sea. Nobody has the right to push us back. We were there, by the way. We are not new. For thousands of years, we are there. Always, we are there. And third, with our economic might, political strength, military strength, comes diplomatic strength. With diplomatic strength comes projects our military powers. In order to safeguard our national interest, we need access to the sea for commerce, trade, import, export, plus we need a military base as well. That was also openly declared by the Ethiopian government in the memorandum of understanding signed between the Ethiopian government and the Somaliland government in January 2024, as folks would remember. So that should be strengthened. It's our right. And fourthly, or thirdly or fourthly, what I will say is that Ethiopia is there to protect its own interests, but it's also there to protect the interest of others. We cannot be taken for granted. There are smaller countries that are bullied by bully governments. So Ethiopia is in our blood, is in our character. Historically, for thousands of years, we are known in the Bible, in the Quran, as a fair people, as a just people, who don't trample upon the rights of others, but who protect their own with pride, their own independence, our own values. By the same logic, we shouldn't let the Red Sea area, the Bab el-Mandeb area, the Gulf of Aden, and the Indian subcontinent, Ethiopia shouldn't, given our growing power, we shouldn't let other tyrant governments play football in this part of the world. We are also stakeholders. We have the right to be there. And one last point is that the more Ethiopia plays a role in that, what we see is that we become, in Amharic, we have a beautiful word I use a few times, and that is Ethiopia becomes an alenta. Ethiopia becomes a protector and supporter of other vulnerable states who need our support. So for this and other reasons, the presence of Ethiopia in the Horn and the role that Ethiopia plays as a stabilizing force in the Red Sea and in the Horn is good, is positive and conducive to the neighborhood, to African politics, and even to the Arab countries and the Western interest as well. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Professor. To conclude our discussion, I'd like to ask one final question. Do you see a risk of Sudan fragmenting further, potentially leading to the creation of new states as South Sudan did in 2011? And what would be the most viable path toward ending the ongoing conflict and ensuring long-term stability and unity in Sudan?
Great question. Now, this is a question that focuses on the Sudan. Yes, there is a risk of, because of the civil war that we have discussed already. Yes, Sudan has the risk of being fragmented. Already it has. South Sudan split from North Sudan, the Southerners. They fought the Anyanya 1 and Anyanya 2 movement for 40, 50 years. Ethiopia even played a role in 1972 to find a solution, and then it collapsed and it continued. So yes, South Sudan split. There is also a risk. There is the Darfur people, that they are found in northwest and southwest part of the Sudan. The Darfurians, they have fought bloody wars for many years, and then General al-Bashir made peace with them, and he made even the rebel leader as a vice president for one, and also Lieutenant General Hermiti Dongolo was made into to join the cabinet as helping strengthening the peace efforts. So that's how he came to power. Actually, that's how he was the number 2 guy for al-Bashir. And al-Burhan had to take him because he cannot push him aside because of the Darfur issue. So Darfur, they might go. They might go if Sudan deteriorates to a very worst condition. But given the 2 years and two plus years of civil disorder, it seems now the central government now had managed, especially in the last 4 or 5 months, had managed to build up its power and to regain some lost territories. It is the RDF which is now sort of in a retreat. So if this process continues, the fragmentation process will stop. But if the rapid forces win, then the fragmentation process will be enhanced more. So here again, what we see is that Egypt, RDF, and other countries support not RDF, the central government. If this continues and if the central government plays, holds the ground, should put it that way. If they continue to hold the ground, that is in a way, in effect, it means they will stop the fragmentation process. But if it loses and there is no central power in Khartoum, then the fragmentation might precipitate. But for now, that's how I see it. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Is there anything you might add as a path forward?
In the Horn? Yeah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And secondly, I would like Horn Review, thank you for inviting me, Horn Review. You and your friends and colleagues as well. Keep up the great job. We need more, I would say, credible, academic, research-founded articles that you guys write, as well as you have also the Analytica, I believe, the social media version. Keep up the good work, and we need more of that, and I wish you all the best. And thank you once again for the great questions, and you as well.
Of course. Thank you, Professor, for your insights on behalf of my viewers. Thank you for your time and valuable perspective.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.